All right, it's Fanmail Friday, and you wondered, should the MLB implement trades for draft picks? Well, Colin Cowherd would appreciate that, right? Let's talk about it. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you want to give back to the Super Halo Bros for all the Angel content, here's some things that you can do. You can leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On Everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come on over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more. And right now, new customers like you can get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 money line bet, any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started.
Happy Friday to you, and thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Mike, it's a Fan Mail Friday, and of course, we got questions from all of our Locked On Everydayers. So many good questions. In fact, I saved some for another show because there's so many good questions that we don't have enough time to get to, but you guys really showed up with the questions. And so if it won't be on today's show, we'll do our best to get it on another edition of Fan Mail Friday, because I'm sure they'll still be relevant by the time that we get to them in a week's time. And plus, the news pretty slow so far. And I know it's only been a day or so since the World Series has ended. And
don't be greedy, John.
I'm so greedy. I'm ready for the hot stove,
Let's go.
friend. All right. Hey, Mike, let's get into our first set of questions. The first one comes from Kevin on Instagram. He wants to know if he's delusional. Well, we can't diagnose that, but we can clarify for him.
Yes.
So let me read this question here. Am I delusional, or do we look good for 2024? Trout and Rendon need bounce-back years, but we also have Neto, Ohapi, Drury, Shawnuel, Moniak, Sandoval, Detmers, Estevez, Joyce, Moore, Anderson as solid players around this roster we haven't had in so long. We just need to stay healthy, hopefully resign Ohtani, and grab a solid starting pitcher in free agency who can get us quality starts. When have we ever had Trout, Ohtani, and Rendon play 140 plus games in the same year? Never.
So I love that he answers his own question. Never.
Yeah, never. And I think he makes a good point. But Mike, what are your initial thoughts here?
Johnny, my initial thoughts on this Angel team, and I love that question. Am I delusional? You and I have been considered delusional. People have called us that, but it's okay to have some hope. It's okay to look at this team and be excited about this team. Here's how I feel. I really am cautious because of our injury history. I'm cautious with our pitching staff. There's a lot of potential, Johnny, but potential versus performance are two different things. And that's always been the narrative with the Angel pitching staff is, they could be so good. I actually went back and listened to an episode before this last season, and you and I were really excited about this pitching staff because they ended last year so strong. And then they fell apart. They really weren't the same guys they were in August.
No.
And
even
in
Patrick Sandoval in the WBC took on the whole Team USA and looked like a stud.
Right.
And then he certainly regressed in 2023, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah. So I want to see performance, quite honestly. I don't want to hear about potential. I want to see performance. I'm cautious with our hitters as well. I think Moniak is a great hitter, but he was really hot, and then he got ice cold. And it feels like he could be a guy over 162 games that could get it together and hold it together and potentially have a really good year. But there's that word, potentially. So when it comes to 2024, I'm of this mindset. Show me, don't tell me. How do you feel, Johnny?
You brought up Mickey Moniak, and it got me thinking. I say you platoon him, Mike. I think him and Joe Adell platoon together, and you watch them both excel, and their batting averages go up and their performance go up because why not?
Yes. Somebody on yesterday's show commented, and we're going to talk about it on another episode, but just briefly, somebody said, is Joe Adell our Adolis Garcia? And I was like, I really like that thought. So we're going to do some work on that and then talk about that on an upcoming show.
I think it was Norman O'Brien, who's a Locked On Everydayer. So thank you for that comment, Norman. Here are some of my thoughts. I think there's a good base here, Mike. There's players to be excited about. There's some veterans around the team that really make this team look good. Some of these young guys are going to be around the team for years to come. But my mantra, and I think you've adopted it too, is no expectations, because I want to watch these guys play. I will watch Nolan Shonowell and Zach Neto and Logan O'Hoppe and Mickey Moniak and Joe Adell. I'll watch those guys play and struggle and work through it and get better. I'll watch all 162 games of that if it means that good things are on the way. And maybe they'll be good in 2024. But again, I have no expectations for the team. And like you mentioned, because of the health of Trout and Rendon, it gets harder to hang my hat on that each year to say what Kevin was saying. And I understand where Kevin's coming from of like, we haven't seen these guys in a full season together.
Right.
And that even includes when there was a 60-game season, and that was just 60 games, but that was the only healthy season they've all had together. I just think that hanging your hat on them staying healthy and playing 140 plus games together, it was more likely last year, and it was even more likely the year before that. But now here we are going into 2024, and I just don't think that we can keep hanging our hat on that anymore. So
agreed.
The team looks good on paper, but there's a lot of outside factors too. Coaching staff, which I think is a big contributor to why the pitching staff regressed, the manager, free agent signings, all of that stuff. So again, I agree. I think that there are definitely moves you can make to make this team watchable in 2024.
Yeah.
I would rather not have any expectations and be surprised and delighted, Mike, when good stuff happens for them.
Yeah. So in summary, Kevin, you're not delusional.
No.
You have hope. It's good to have hope. You love the Angels. You're rooting for the Angels. There are some who are just critiquing everything that the Angels do. They're negative about everything. And as Johnny has asked, like, what do you like about this team?
What do you enjoy?
I am glad that you like this team because I like this team. But I think that you're with us. I think that you're with us and saying, hey, don't tell me, show me. And that's really important. Johnny, Ducks fan. Angels Ducks fan. I love that. Angels Ducks fan, 1969 on YouTube said, will MLB ever implement trades for draft picks? And how do we feel about trading draft picks or keeping a player to be named or cash considerations, having a trade between picks and player to be named later? So Johnny, what do you think about trading draft picks? It's not something that the MLB does right now. Colin Cowherd thought they did, and he was wrong. So what do you think about trading draft picks?
Well, personally, I like to see it. I think it adds more versatility, more options for players and teams to make moves. It certainly can make trades a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
And then I think that teams who trade away players to take a gamble on prospects, like the A's will trade their Matt Olsons and their Sean Murphys and get prospects in return. If you want more controllable prospects, aka draft picks, then perhaps you trade Matt Olson and then you get to choose somebody that you actually have scouted and looked at and want and all that kind of stuff. So I think you get to be more selective with your draft picks. So I think that's something that would be a lot of fun if they decided to do it. What about you?
MLB draft picks are very different than like NFL and NBA. And I would even say NHL, right?
Yeah.
Like NFL, NBA, they play almost immediately. And MLB,
unless you're the Angels,
right? Well, I was going to say in MLB, it hasn't really been the case unless you are the Angels. The Angels have really moved their guys through the system pretty quickly, and that's been out of necessity and that's been out of need. But I think if players are going to move a bit more quickly through the minors, then I could see the MLB implementing trades for that in the future, because that's what makes them so valuable, is that you know that you're going to have an impact perhaps that year or the next year. And even like second round picks and third round picks. NFL is strong, NBA not as strong. And so it'd be interesting to see what the MLB would do with their draft picks. But I think at least if they start, you can trade first round draft picks and exchange those for player to be named later, or exchange those for, I'm going to trade this guy for, your first this year and next year, because those players seem to be moving quicker through the minor leagues. And if I'm a owner, if I'm a GM, that would incentivize it for me, knowing like, hey, I'm going to have a Shonowell or a Zach Neto on my team within 3 to 6 months, right?
Yeah. The only pushback there is Chase Silseth wasn't first round, and he was the first one from that draft class to get called up. So you never know with draft picks, and you never know
Exactly.
who's going to be the closest.
And then there's
to it.
Jared Walsh drafted in the 1000th round, right? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, that guy was far, what is it, 39th round? I mean, he was drafted so
Something
far
like
deep
that.
into the round and made it to the major leagues.
2 notes, though. I think that this is going to have to be something that they put into a new CBA between the Players Union and the MLB. I also think that they would have to limit the number of picks a team could trade for, or maybe even limit like one trade per round, because otherwise you'll have the A's or whoever have 5 first-round picks in a row at some point. And so I imagine that they would have some rules in place, but definitely this would have to be something that they put into a new collective bargaining agreement between the union and MLB.
My understanding is that they don't have specific rules in NFL and NBA, so I think I'd push back on that and say I don't think I would want any rules, like, because if they want to stockpile first round picks and they know that they're going to get some really good players, then it would make sense. Maybe it would fire up the hot stove even more than it already is.
Right.
And maybe perhaps it's just an offseason move. That's the other thing they probably have to negotiate too. Is this a trade deadline thing, or is this an offseason thing, or can you do it at both times? In the NFL and NBA, you can do it at both times.
Yeah, the Major League Baseball owners are so good at like
manipulation.
Manipulating rules, manipulating things that I could foresee. I already foresee it being a problem, which is why I think that they would need some guardrails.
Leave it to John Fisher,
there.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, coming up on Locked On Angels, which free agent out there is like the classic Arte Moreno signing where all of us are like, really? Did we get that guy? Because it's a name, because it's popular, because they're the best guy on the market. Well, there's kind of somebody out there that somebody asked us about. And so we'll talk about that coming right up.
Locked On Angels is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get in on all of the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers like you can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. So, Johnny, if you were to put a bet down on if the MLB would be like the NFL and trade draft picks, would you put a $5 moneyline bet down on that with the potential to win $150? And do you think you would win?
I think so. I mean, maybe it won't happen this year or the next year, but I'd put money on that. Let's go.
I think it would be wise for the MLB to do that. So that's $150 if your team wins. $150 and you just put down $5. Gosh, it's a win-win, right? So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on all of the action. App is really easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. John and I have a brother who has who's a wife, and his wife has an uncle, of course, and he made a bet on the Texas Rangers and ended up winning a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And so we're going to get some tips from him, and then we're going to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, and we can get involved in all of the action this NFL season. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Locked On Everydayers, please join us next week because it is GM week. And how we're going to start this out is by looking at our picks from last year and deciding if they were successful, if we were unsuccessful, if we should be fired as GMs. And then Mike and I will make our picks for this offseason. And so we'd love to have you be part of that conversation. GM week starting next week on Locked On Angels.
All right, Johnny, Fanmail Friday. Question in this second segment was this. We've seen Artie and the Angels go after free agents in the past that were just not the right fit for this team. Cough, Hamilton, cough. Who are some of the free agents this coming offseason that might sound tempting, but you think the Angels should ultimately stay away from? Why don't you start us?
Yeah, Nick Vlahakis on YouTube shared that one. So shout out to Nick. He's a new Locked On Everydayer, so thanks for the question, Nick. One free agent, Mike, that I would be wary of is Cody Bellinger. It feels like an Artie move, signing someone after a career year, which is basically like what he's had this past season with the Cubs. It wouldn't be terrible, but it would be a very Artie move. And here's why. Cody does have a mutual option. I believe he's already turned that down with the Cubs for $12 million. Spot Track has a market value of $22 million a year for Cody Bellinger. The Athletic projects him to get 6 years, $144 million, which is $24 million a year. With Cody, you're going to get an outfielder and a first baseman, and he's really great on defense. He's speedy in the outfield. He has a rocket arm, so he's very good defensively. As far as offense goes, Cody certainly improved with the Cubs, but he did have some pretty down years with the Angels. So it does seem like he was able to figure some things out with the Cubs coaching staff. Funny how the Dodgers couldn't figure things out with him. It just goes to show that, like, sometimes you just need a new set of eyes to watch you do your thing.
Yeah.
So maybe the Angels aren't as bad as we have given them grief for, considering, not even the Dodgers could really figure out Cody Bellinger. But there is evidence, Mike, to suggest that Bellinger outperformed himself in 2023. In fact, his expected batting average versus his actual batting average goes like this. He hit 307, but his expected was 270. He slugged 525, but his expected slugging was 437. And so for those who might be unfamiliar with expected batting average, expected slugging, it's all about how the hitter swings and makes contact with the ball, and all of the mechanics of their swing should yield this result. However, because baseball is a game of inches and luck and all sorts of things, he outperformed those stats. But usually expected batting averages and expected stats can give you an indication of where a guy will eventually go. Yes, he might have outperformed that this year, but eventually they'll come back down to earth. We talked about that with Mickey Moniak. Like, he was on fire when he came up, and the expected number said, he's going to come back down to earth, and come back down to earth he did. Mike, there's some good changes for Cody Bellinger that he made with the Cubbies. Why don't you go over those for us?
He became really selective with his pitches.
Mm-hmm.
His swinging strike percentage dropped from 12% to 9.3%, while his called strike percentage went up because he was taking pitches in the zone. He was being more selective. He stopped swinging and missing a lot. He was in the 77th percentile in whiff rate. He stopped K'ing so much, 87th percentile in K percentage, and being selective led him to being in the 86th percentile in sweet spot percentage. I love all of these stats, meaning that a batted ball event with a launch angle ranging from 8 to 32 degrees. So that's what you want. You want to be able to make good contact. So these changes for Cody are the things that happened this last season. It's why we saw an improvement. But Johnny, there's some hesitation with any team that might sign him, but specifically with the Angels, because the Angels would be paying for a 300 hitter who hit a bit closer, like you mentioned, to 270, and a guy who slugged 520, 525, but he's a bit closer to 437. So essentially, you might be paying $24 million for a Bo Bichette or a Juan Soto type of numbers guy, but you could end up getting a Jeff McNeil or a Lane Thomas in reality. And that's
both good guys, don't get me wrong.
Yes,
but
not what you're paying for, though, right?
Not $24 million, right? Because you're paying 24 to get those Bo Bichette numbers, those Juan Soto numbers.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's more like Jeff McNeil and Lane Thomas. Mike, who's a guy that you think already is prone to signing here?
Man, you're probably going to hate me for this, but I think it's Blake Snell, John. And I know that he had a really good season. He was 1-6 with a 5.4 ERA and 9 starts, and was, after that, arguably the best pitcher in baseball.
Yeah.
And he's a lefty who performed well on an underperforming team. Does that sound like anything you've been watching all season long, Johnny? And so I just don't know if the Blake Snell, who is older now, the guy that we sign, and obviously you're going to have to give him a few years, and you're going to have to give him a lot of money. I feel like it would be just a brick on the chest if you sign this guy for a couple of reasons. One, because you're going to be locked into a lot of money. And there's still questions about Shohei, and obviously Rendon's contract is kind of a brick on the chest as well. But two, he's another lefty, and the Angels have so many lefties with Tyler Anderson and Detmers and Sandoval, and then to have Blake Snell. You're lefty heavy, and I think that they need to focus on right-handed pitchers to balance out this starting rotation. And if they're going to spend money, I'd rather have them spend money on right-handed starters than left-handed starters, my opinion.
You're in luck because Artie never pays top dollar for starting pitchers. So
Right.
there you go.
Right.
Hey, El Nino Tech 11 on Instagram said, is Nolan Shonowell a lock at first base next season, or do they start him off in AAA to get more reps? What do you think, Mike?
It's a great question. I don't think that they should start him off in AAA. I think that he should be up in the major leagues. And I think what we saw, the glimpses of what we saw in just a small sample size last season, is why he should be there. I think that his power will come. He'll be more of a gap-to-gap guy. But the reason why I think that he's perfect for this Angel lineup is because he makes contact. And that's what they need. They need a guy who's going to make contact, who's not necessarily right. He's not necessarily going to hit a lot of bombs for you or hit a lot of doubles for you, but a guy who's going to slap the ball around a bit, who's going to move runners over. That's what this lineup desperately needed in 2023. And I think that Shonowell can be that guy in 2024. And as you mentioned, he is somebody that is great at the top of the lineup, and his pitch selection is great. And so he's gonna have a really strong on base percentage and a strong batting average. His slugging may not be there initially, but remember, he was college and then he was quickly in AA, and then they moved him into the major leagues.
Yeah.
And this year he's going to get a full spring training, as will Zach Neto, and they're both going to be able to have full off season. And so I would say give this guy, unless something drastically changes, give this guy the first base starting job in 2024 and let him run with it.
I think between the fact that they called up Neto so quickly in the year, and then remember they planned on Ohapi being the primary catcher in 2023, and they had only seen him in spring training and then a little bit at the end of 2022. So I think it's safe to say that Shonowell is going to be at first base. And you mentioned the lack of power. I think the Angels have plenty of power through the lineup. Yeah. They need a leadoff guy. They need a Shonowell at the top of the order, and I can't wait to see him in front of guys like Trout and Trout, right? Maybe Ohtani. Hopefully we'll see Ohtani, right? Hey, Corey Estrella 756 on Instagram said, when do you guys think the Angels will name the new manager? And if they're going to name Kim Ng or another president of baseball operations? Well, the word is that the manager should be coming soon. The word was that it was going to be at the end of the World Series. So this video might already be outdated by the time you see it, because breaking news can happen at any time, but maybe over the weekend. Soon. I would say, gosh, maybe even by the end of next week, Mike. By the time we're doing Fanmail Friday next week, it could very well happen. So I think that we're pretty close to finding out what's going on with the Halos and their managerial situation here for 2024. Mike, we got a last couple of questions here in segment 3. And the first one comes from, Locked On Everydayer, Aggie Nicky on Instagram. He said, would you give any Angels a long extensions, kind of like what the Braves have done, or like what Julio Rodriguez got with the Mariners? Mike, who would you choose to give a long contract extension to at this point in their Angels career?
I would start with Ohapi, and I would consider Zach Neto. Those are the two names that would come immediately to mind, and to lock them in. Perhaps not this offseason or at the start of the season, but I do think that after this season, I would heavily consider, based on their performance, heavily consider what kind of long-term deal you could give both those guys. If I had to choose just one, I would start with Ohapi, because I love having a strong catcher. We've seen teams with strong catchers perform well in the playoffs and get to the World Series in just the last 10 years. And the Angels had a strong catcher in Benji Molina at one point in history, and they went to the World Series. So I think having a Logan Ohapi locked in for a long time, and if you sign him early, you can get a team-friendly deal, similar to maybe like an Austin Riley and somebody with the Braves. I think the Braves have been brilliant in how they've approached their locking up their long time, or their young players for a long time. So I would start with Logan Ohapi, and I would consider Zach Neto as well.
I think I'm with you on that. I think I would start with Ohapi as well, just because he is the guy who's going to command the field, right? He's going to hit well at the plate. He's got to improve the defense behind the dish a little bit more. And but he's working with the pitching staff, and I think he's already got veteran instincts, and he's already got some great side-to-side movement behind the dish that I think is only going to get better. So as a franchise guy, I think you Angels and good catchers, I love that combination, Mike. And whether they were, offensively good or even defensively good. I know you don't like Jeff Mathis, but at least he was a wizard behind the dish, and but Neto would be my second choice because, again, the shortstop position is kind of the second in command in the infield, right? And so you got to lock down these leaders for the future. And if you lock them up until they're like 30 years old and you get the best years out of their career, I think that's a huge win for the Angels.
And you lock up somebody like a Ohapi or a Neto, it benefits this team in a way that we haven't had in a really long time. And no disrespect to Mike Trout, but we have a leader who doesn't really lead. Again, no disrespect, but there isn't this powerful leader at the front of the clubhouse. He leads by example, and he's a great positive guy and a humble guy and a good dude, right? But I think a Logan Ohapi and a Zach Neto are the types of guys that are like, I don't want to lose anymore, and I don't want to watch this happen anymore. And so I would appreciate that as a fan, hearing from them more often and knowing that, hey, they are the leaders of this team. We've locked them into being the leaders of this team. We've given them contracts to be the leaders of this team. Having them talk to us more often would be great.
Sean's World on Instagram, he said, your top pick for manager and top dark horse pick for manager. Plus, who is the Urshela or Drury of 2024? So, Mike, let me give you my top manager picks here.
Okay.
Look, I know that he in no way, shape, or form has been attached to the Angels, but Craig Counsell, man, is somebody that I would love to see come over and manage this team. But since he has not been connected to the Angels, you and I have been pounding this drum for a long time. If Erstad is a legitimate candidate, I'm going with Darren Erstad. And my dark horse, believe it or not, Torrey Hunter. I'm super into Torrey Hunter in terms of being a manager, and I think that he would do a really great job. I tweeted the other day from Locked On Angels that a lot of the criticisms that Erstad and Torrey Hunter get are the fact that they don't have MLB coaching experience. But Craig Counsell had no MLB coaching experience. AJ Hinch, Mike Matheny, Scott Service. Like there's a whole list of guys out there. Even Walt Weiss got the Rockies job, and I know he's with the Braves right now on the bench, but he's somebody that you and I have talked about to be the Angels manager before. So I think that if you just are patient with guys like Erstad and Torrey Hunter, they're going to figure it out. But who are your picks for top manager and dark horse?
John, I love Erstad for top manager. Dark horse, I would agree with you with Torrey Hunter. Here's the out of the pocket idea. Don Mattingly. I think Don Mattingly could be somebody that could come over and really be a great manager for the Angels. And if you do hire an Erstad, then have Don Mattingly be your Ray Montgomery in the dugout. Or if you hire a Torrey Hunter, have Don Mattingly be his Ray Montgomery in the dugout and be the guy that carries a whole lot of weight, that carries a whole lot of experience, and can help influence the team in a positive way. I think if you do hire an Erstad or a Hunter, you got to get somebody like a Mattingly or maybe a Ron Renicky that can come in and hold down that second in command position. So I would say kind of hasn't even been discussed. Don Mattingly might actually be somebody that would be great for this Angel team as the manager or maybe as an assistant manager.
Now he did ask who's the Gio Urshela type of player this year. So I did a little research, and it's got to be here's I think what they're saying is it's got to be someone who's kind of under the radar, somebody the Angels could sign or trade for. And trades are always hard because you could just kind of pick anybody on any team and be like, that's them. But you need a guy who's versatile, can hit about 260 and play all over. Mike, I think the most Gio Urshela person who's a free agent is Ahmed Rosario. And here's why. I broke it down, and he can play shortstop. He can play second base. He can play the outfield, primarily played left field. His defense definitely took a step back in 2023 compared to 2022. But with these three with runners in scoring position, remember, we were so impressed with Urshela just having the ability to move runners over. Yeah. Well, turns out his runners in scoring position batting average was not fantastic. Urshela hit 229 with runners in scoring position. Brandon Drury hit 281. Rosario hit 321 with runners in scoring position. So I think he brings that to the table. Their strikeout rate versus their walk rate. Rosario is 16.5 strikeout rate and a 5.3 walk rate. Urshela was 15.8 in strikeout rate and a 4.4% walk rate. Drury, 26% strikeout rate and a 4.8% walk rate. So I think, Mike, if the Angels want to get crafty or creative, perhaps Rosario's not going to be as expensive as he might have been coming off of that 2022 season.
Sure.
Because this 2023 was not great for him. Now, Gio was used a lot at third because of Rendon. And so that's kind of the one area that's missing from Ahmed Rosario. Perhaps Drury could play over there because he has played third base in the past, or perhaps Rendon actually does play at third base this season. What a concept.
Surprise.
Right? And so at the end of the day, yes, I think there's multiple options out there. Like Jaimar Candelario is also a third baseman. But in terms of like who's the under the radar, maybe somebody people aren't looking at, I thought it might be Ahmed Rosario.
All right, last question for Fanmail Friday from our buddy Locked On Everydayer James Russell Barton on Instagram. He said, if the Angels don't re-sign Ohtani, what players would you like to see the Angels get in free agency and in trades? Johnny, you want to answer that question?
Well, good news, James, because we are doing GM episodes next week. And so while your question is the perfect fit for Fanmail Friday, that's going to take a much longer conversation. And so we're going to go over our picks from last year. Mike's going to go first this year because I went first last year, and then I'll go after Mike, and we'll try not to pick the same guys and the same names and things like that. But I think you bring up a good point. Is either one of us going to re-sign Ohtani? Are we bringing him back? Or are we going to spend that money on other free agents? Well, you'll find out about it on Monday and figure out what we would do if we were in Perry Manassian's shoes. So we're really excited about that.
That's called a tease. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Locked On Everydayers, remember, we're here Monday through Friday with all of your Halo content. The GMs are going to be meeting soon. There's a lot of off-season news coming, and we've got it all for you. Make sure that you are with us every single day, audio, video, and follow us on social media because we're updating as things start to unfold, and it'll get pretty hot around here. So, Johnny, how can they find us on social media?
Yeah, keep up with us at Locked On Angels on Twitter and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. If you're on YouTube, be sure you hit that subscribe button. And if anything breaking news happens, you'll see our shorts, our quick videos on YouTube, and you'll find them on Twitter and Instagram as well. Mike, what do we have on deck for Monday's show?
It is GM week, so I'm looking forward to seeing how we did. I feel like I did pretty good.
For last year?
I'm just going to tell you, I think I did pretty good. We'll see what you think. We'll see what the everydayers think, but I'm excited about the conversation starting Monday. It's GM week, so join us on Locked On Angels.
All right, y'all. Have a great weekend, and we hope you'll come back and join us again on Monday. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
Pretty good.